6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight.
I commit this Labour government to nothing less than the abolition of long-term youth unemployment.
Unemployment has reached its highest level in 4 years and young people are paying the price. Private sector jobs are disappearing while public sector pay is booming and businesses are saying hiring is no longer worth it. But is this by design? Is Labour hoping to make people utterly reliant on the state? Or is it simply the party of economic illiteracy? Also tonight.
There is a link between ethnicity, between race, between culture, that we identify that so that we can deal with it.
The Home Secretary says the rights of foreign sex offenders have been put before the safety of British women and girls, promising tougher deportations and the biggest ever crackdown on sexual violence. She says she shares the public's fury. But why hasn't Labour been saying this for the last decade? Will it deliver? Plus...
In a little while, you'll be seeing I'm suing the BBC for putting words in my mouth. Literally, they put words in my mouth.
President of the United States, Donald Trump, has launched a £7.4 billion defamation lawsuit against the BBC, accusing the broadcaster of misleading editing in a panorama documentary about the 6th of January Capitol riots, and is seeking at least £3 billion in damages. The BBC says it will defend the case despite apologising for an error of judgment. Meanwhile, talks on a £31 billion UK-US tech deal are reportedly stalled over trade disputes. Is the special relationship in special measures? Also, the British state and its institutions have been the envy of the world and commanded the loyalty of its people for centuries. What have we done right for all these decades and centuries? But today, is the state functioning as it should? A new paper from the Centre for a Better Britain explores the issue and why it matters. I'll be talking to the organisation's top man shortly. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most pugnacious panel, the Conservative MP for Romford, Andrew Rosendale, and the journalist and broadcaster, Michael Crick. As always, let me know what you think, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Jacob, thank you very much and good evening. The top stories as our UK police are stepping up armed patrols on the transport network and in other crowded places as they warn of an increased terror risk over the festive period. Senior officers from counter-terror policing and the British Transport Police have issued a joint call for vigilance following the recent attacks targeting the Jewish community in Manchester and in Australia, warning that mass gatherings over the Christmas and New Year period remain an attractive target for terrorists. That's as new details are emerging about the gunmen behind the massacre in Sydney. Indian police say 50-year-old Sajid Akram was originally from the southern city of Hyderabad and had limited contact with family there. Authorities in India say relatives were unaware of any radical beliefs or activities as Australian police continue to examine possible overseas links. Detectives are investigating claims that the two gunmen travelled to the Philippines weeks before the attack for what's being described as military-style training. 15 people were killed in Sunday's shooting. 9 are in a critical condition. The Prime Minister says the attack appears to have been motivated by Islamic State ideology. Donald Trump says he's suing the BBC, launching a multi-billion-dollar legal action over what he calls a doctored edit of his January the 6th speech. The US president says a Panorama documentary falsely made it appear he called for violence at the Capitol, accusing the broadcaster of defamation and misleading editing. The BBC apologised for giving a mistaken impression, but insists there's no basis for a defamation claim. In a statement, a spokesperson for the BBC said the broadcaster will defend the case. UK unemployment has risen to 5.1%, its highest level since early 2021. The ONS says young people are being hit the hardest, with unemployment among 18 to 24-year-olds jumping by 85,000. Elsewhere, the driver who ploughed into crowds at Liverpool's Premier League victory parade has been jailed for 21 years and 6 months. Paul Doyle injured 134 supporters after driving his car into fans. The court heard the 54-year-old lost his temper and acted in what a judge called inexplicable fury. Dashcam footage showed supporters thrown onto the bonnet and dragged beneath the car as Doyle shouted abuse and accelerated through closed streets. Doyle pleaded guilty to 31 offences, including attempting to cause grievous bodily harm to a 6-month-old baby. And in sport, Paris Saint-Germain have been ordered to pay former striker Kylian Mbappe £52.5 million in unpaid salary and bonuses by a French court. Mbappe had been seeking £231.5 million from his former club after the long-running dispute reached a Paris court in November. The European champions were countersuing the France captain for £211 million. The 26-year-old claimed the 9-figure sum as damages in response to a contract dispute and ill treatment by the club. However, he was awarded just over a fifth of that amount in court today. The court recognised that PSG had failed to pay 3 months of his salary between April and June last year, as well as an ethics bonus and a signing bonus under his contract. It's believed the majority of the money awarded to Mbappe was bonuses rather than his salary. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, it's over to Jacob.
You can now watch GB News live across the United States of America and the world on Truth Plus. Scan the QR code to find out more, or visit gbnews.com/truth.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Unemployment has risen to 5.1%, the highest level in 4 years, and has been rising for 14 consecutive months. This time last year, unemployment stood at 4.3%, and those paying the highest price are young workers. In 3 months, unemployment among 18 to 24-year-olds rose by 85,000, the largest increase in 2 years. Redundancies have risen to their highest level since the pandemic, and private sector employment has been shrinking for more than a year. These outcomes did not happen by accident. Employers are telling us why they are so restrained in the face of uncertainty over taxation, rising national insurance costs, and mixed messages from the government ahead of both their budgets. Many firms stopped hiring new staff and others cut jobs because taking on new staff has become unaffordable. At the same time, public sector wages are rising at more than 7%, while private sector pay growth is slowing to under 4%. Resources, which are all created by the private sector, the public sector does not create wealth, are being directed towards expanding public sector employment, even as the private sector, the engine of job creation, contracts. This removes incentives to work and makes welfare a lifestyle choice. Tax and welfare system that weakens the incentive to work, high taxes making hiring harder, while increasing welfare spending risks trapping people outside the labour market altogether. It is killing the jobs market. Instead of encouraging the transition into work, the system discourages it. You know the story. £71,000 a year in the private sector to be enough to make up for benefits if you have 3 children. So the private sector suffers, and that's where wealth is created, and Labour's policies seem deliberately to be exacerbating the situation. Unsustainable increases in the minimum wage, leading businesses to warn that higher wage price workers can't be afforded, they can't be paid for, and it leads to inflation as well. And these are the result of political choices made in Downing Street. It is a choice made by Rachel Reeves and Sir Keir Starmer, and they're choices that misunderstand basic economics, ignore employer behaviour, and prioritise state employment and welfare over growth, enterprise and productivity. The result is a weaker economy, fewer opportunities, and a generation of young people being left behind. We are in an economic doom loop. As ever, let me know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm now joined by my most pugnacious panel, the Conservative MP for Romford, Andrew Rosendale, and the journalist and broadcaster, Michael Crick. Michael, this is just what Labour governments do, isn't it? Every single one, other than the one in 1924, which only lasted a few months, has left office with unemployment higher than when it came into office.
Well, a lot of the reasons behind this rise in unemployment, I mean, some of it is due to the government. I've criticised the government on this programme before. The employers' national insurance rise last year, for example, and the chaos surrounding the budget this autumn, and which left employers being cautious and postponing decisions and so on. That was not at all helpful. But there are other factors as well which are affecting, which are more long-term, like Brexit. I mean, remember, Jeremy Warner, the assistant editor of The Telegraph, this channel's favourite newspaper, said the other day that Brexit had been an unmitigated economic disaster.
Jeremy Warner's long-standing Remainer.
Well, nonetheless, he is from The Telegraph. Well, but he is right. It has been.
Is a very classic newspaper.
And the British public are starting to realise this, and in British employers and business. Polls show that if we had most people now want to think it was a mistake, and we now want to go back into Europe.
Polls mainly showed that people wanted to vote to remain, and they did they? So I wouldn't believe anything.
Well, I think the polls are rather more dramatic than the margin that there was at the time of the referendum. Other factors. Trump's tariffs, which have caused chaos throughout the world, and indecision, slowed down economies inevitably, are another factor why our growth is not as great as it was. And the third factor...
Keir Starmer says he's got a special relationship with Trump. He has him eating out of his
we've still got to pay extra tariffs.
So he's failed.
We've still got...
Starmer's failed in his relationship with Trump.
He's failed. He's succeeded more than others. But, of course, part of the effect isn't just the tariffs we have to pay, but the negative effect worldwide, which also has an effect on our economy. And the third one is the prospect of artificial intelligence and the fact that people are likely to cut back on their employees ahead of what may or may not be the long-term growth in employment when new ideas come forward based on AI. Sorry to go on for so long, but I think all that needed saying.
I think that did need saying. I think it's basically a mistaken view of what's happened. I think that our economy has been particularly badly hit because deliberate Downing Street policies and, of course, the crazy green agenda that is costing business so much money and making us uncompetitive globally.
Jacob, what you've said is completely right. I'm sorry, Michael, but Brexit is nothing to do with the situation we're in today. It's a failure of our government, the Labour government, in the policies that it's pursued when it got elected to office. We were in a far better position prior to the last general election. Today, we're heading downward spiral. It's a catastrophe for our country. Their policies are not working, but then socialist governments always end up in the same type of mess. Nothing to do with Brexit. A lot to do, I think...
Saying
hang on, no, you've had to say. A lot to do with those crazy lockdowns that we had. We've got the debts. Well, I disagree with them. I voted against them. So we had those lockdowns. That's left us with a huge debt. That's changed the psychology of the country in a very detrimental way. But more than that, since July 24, Labour have increased taxes massively. They've increased welfare massively. They've got us into further debt. And they've adopted policies which are anti-growth. If you want a successful economy, you need to liberalise the economy, you need free market policies, you need high growth and low welfare. They've done the opposite. It's not surprising that unemployment is rising under those conditions.
Well, I would never expect two arch Brexiteers like you, who will go to your graves believing it was still a jolly good idea, despite the fact that you two and others like you have shrunk the economy significantly already, with further shrinkage to come beyond what it would otherwise be.
So why is it that the UK economy, since the quarter that we left the European Union, has grown faster than France, Germany and Italy?
Well, there are all sorts of factors as to why the economies go up and down.
Okay,
but
ours has performed
ours would
better than the European Union's big economies.
And it would have performed even better if we...
On a possible basis.
Well, just
make that argument.
Just on the basis that if you trade with Europe, it's so much harder than it used to be.
Our trade with Europe has gone up
because of the European Union. They have punished Britain. What they've done, they hated Brexit. Right. They hated the fact that we had the courage to say no. We're not going to be controlled by Brussels anymore. They don't like it, and they've made it as difficult as possible.
But you have to go through so many bureaucratic obstacles compared with what you do. A lot of British companies don't trade with Europe anymore and suffer, and our economy and the European economies suffer as a result.
Let's be global trading again. Let's do what we've always done throughout our history and be a global trading nation. We don't want to be tied to what France and Germany want. We need to do what's in Britain's interest, surely.
But Michael, you're making all these statements without having the figures to back them up. Our trade has grown. Our invisible trade has grown particularly. Our invisible trade wasn't affected by Brexit because the Services Directive was never fully adopted. Our produce exports have declined partly because we no longer count exports that have come into this country and go out again. That has had an effect. So tropical fruits and so on came into the UK, went to Europe, count as a UK export. Our exports, in spite of that, are up by 2% in nominal terms since we left. So this idea it's all been a disaster is false.
Well, I think you will find
overall exports have grown globally.
I think you will find, if we were to invite a group of economists in here, and there are Brexit economists, I accept that, and I think if you've got a group of economists in here, they would tell you that our economy is significantly, our GDP is significantly lower as a result of Brexit, and it's going to get lower still.
Surely that's to do with COVID and the lockdowns as well. You can't just say
even
it's Brexit.
Taking that fact out.
Could you just explain how the doppelganger models work that they use to show our economy has done less well?
I've no idea how they work.
That's the crucial point. You've no idea.
But these are
because what they've done is they've assumed that our economy would have grown in the way Canada, the US and New Zealand did. Why would we have done that if we remained in the European Union? And bear in mind...
That's your word against them, but I prefer the words of the views of hundreds of economists, thousands of economists, who agree, on the whole, that our economy has done worse as a result of Brexit.
Would you have preferred the letter signed to the Times by 364 economists the day the economy turned round in 1981?
Well, I think economists have learnt the lessons of that.
You see, I just don't think they have. Andrew, sorry, I interrupted you.
But on your point, let me agree with you on one point. I do think that COVID had an effect in terms of mental health and people's and maybe people going back to work. I think that probably did have an effect there.
Calamitous.
And we've got to learn the lessons of that. Yeah. But I think to talk, what was it you said, a catastrophic spiral of decline we're in? I mean, why talk our economy down? You have a Union Jack on your lapel.
Can I get in,
And if people listen to you, they'll get to stop investing.
Look, I believe that Britain, throughout our history, has been a global free trading nation. We don't need Europe to tell us how to trade globally and how to create wealth. We have been the most successful nation on this planet in terms of free trade. We need to just do Brexit properly. The problem with the last government, I'm afraid, is that we didn't do it properly. We fudged the whole thing. We left Northern Ireland behind, and although Jacob really tried as minister in charge of this to make Brexit, the opportunities of Brexit happen, I'm afraid the last government really failed to harness those opportunities. This government definitely won't do it. So we have to look to the future. But ultimately, Britain can be successful economically if we're free. We're not free if we're shackled to rules and regulations and red tape from Brussels. That doesn't work, and the British people voted against it.
I hope you will deliver your message on free trade to Jeremy's friend, Donald Trump, who has caused more damage to world trade in the last year than probably anybody since the 1930s. It's not a different issue, because it affects our economy as well.
My pugnacious panel is showing how pugnacious they can be, even the absence of the great Kelvin Mackenzie. In a moment.
If there is a link between ethnicity, between race, between culture, that we identify that so that we can deal with it.
The Home Secretary says the rights of foreign sex offenders have been put before the safety of British women and girls, promising the biggest ever crackdown on sexual violence. But why hasn't Labour been saying this before? Will it deliver? Thank you.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
I think it's just good, honest, humble food. And yeah, as people get away from the ultra-processed stuff and get back to their roots, and what's better than a good jacket potato?
Do you know what? Sales of jacket spuds have gone through the roof. The big potatoes at Waitrose. There's been a 178% increase in people looking at recipes. And I just think it's wholesome, it's affordable, it's comfortable, you know, it makes you feel good, it's back to basics. That, I think, at the moment, sums up the nation.
I think very much it being affordable as well, with the climate we're living in at the moment, it definitely helps knowing, you know, you're putting food on the table for a reasonable price, and people appreciate that. And it's good, honest food. You can feed your kids, and kids are seeing it on social media, and they're getting excited about it as well. So they're not like, you know, obviously everyone sees all the big brands, and now there's all these, you know, jacket potato people out there, and we're giving them something that's healthy, and they want to eat it. And I think the parents appreciate that.
And Ben, I've seen your videos. They queue around the block to get to you. If people are in the mood to cook a potato tonight, of course, we don't want to affect your sales. What is your sort of top-of-the-pops spud recipe? Give it to us.
Oh, it's all about variety. It's picking the right potato is really important. Get a nice melody or a cara or culture or something like that. Nice and big. In the oven, if you can. Hour and 20. Get a nice crispy skin on there. Loads of butter, loads of cheese, and a nice curry on top or something. That's my go-to.
Ooh. Now, that was a final little curveball there you threw at the last minute there, Ben.
GB News, the People's Channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Well, welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about the failures of the Labour government and unemployment, and the mailmogs have come over the wire. Graham says it's not rocket science. The more people are paid to do nothing, the more people will take that offer up. There is more money available, all tax-free, for those on benefits than many of them would earn with a minimum wage job. A life on benefits is a rational choice for many. And Kat says this government has made it more difficult for employers to create jobs, while at the same time making it easier for people to live on benefits. How can they be surprised at the result? Well, I agree. And Michael says, I assume this isn't Michael Crick, who could have foreseen that making it harder, more complicated and more expensive to employ young people, whilst making it easier, more lucrative and less shameful to claim benefits, would lead to a rise in youth unemployment? The wisdom of GB News viewers knows no bounds. Thank you for those. Well, the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has said the human rights of foreign sex offenders have been put ahead of the safety of British women and girls, and is promising tougher deportations, reformed human rights laws, and the biggest crackdown on sexual violence in history. The Home Secretary says she shares the public's fury and promises that foreign rapists and abusers will have nowhere to hide. Ms Mahmood is right, but it must be asked, why now? Why hasn't Labour been saying this for the past decade, or at least for the past 18 months? Well, I'm joined now by one of the show's favourites, the political commentator Stella Santakido, and of course my panel, Andrew Rosendale and Michael Crick. Stella, thank you for coming in. It is noble of you, because you always come in and defend the government when it's on its weakest possible wicket. Because a year ago, Starmer didn't want another inquiry. He said it's all been done. He didn't really seem to care. And now Shabana Mahmood's taking this seriously. What's happened in that period?
It was wrong of Keir Starmer to reject the inquiry to begin with. There were some good reasons for it, but ultimately, I think that it looked bad, and I think it was the wrong decision, given that there were questions that were not answered. But I'm really, really proud of Shabana Mahmood. I think she's doing a great job, and I think she's not afraid to tackle some very difficult topics, and especially going for Article 3 and Article 8 and saying, look, we are finally going to make it so that you cannot use Article 3 and Article 8 as an excuse to not be deported if you're a criminal who has committed abhorrent sexual violence. And it is very important that Shabana Mahmood does this now, because even though there aren't that many cases of people who we can't deport because of Article 3 and Article 8, there are very, very few numbers, but it looks terrible, and voters feel very, very aggrieved by it.
Okay, I agree with everything Shabana Mahmood has said. The question is, and indeed she said something very sensible on deportations for asylum seekers as well, but she can't actually do it, can she? Because the Home Secretary doesn't decide how Article 3 and Article 8 are interpreted. That's decided by the European Court of Human Rights. And that hasn't taken any notice of the suggestion from 27 member states that it should be changed. And France and Germany didn't join in asking for those changes anyway.
They haven't yet, but they will eventually, because it's not just the UK who is asking for these changes. And I think it is the right thing that we continue pushing for this. A lot of people are saying what you are saying, right? Why hasn't this happened before? And I always ask, how many times have our political leaders had the courage to say, look, I still support human rights and the ECHR, but it needs to be revised. And yes, we still respect courts, but we believe that we need to give them some new instructions, which we are entitled to do.
Well, Kenneth Clarke did it when he was Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary in, I think, about 2012. Michael will know the precise date. And he had some success. It's quite interesting. But he had every country sign the letter. And his success was administrative. So there were a lot of delays at that point, and they asked the court to improve its process to get rid of the delays. And the court broadly did that. But they also asked the court to hand some power back to the member states, and the court did not do that. Whereas this latest letter is all about limiting the power of the court. So the odds on it succeeding seem to me to be low.
It is right that there is going to be some back and forth, and it is right that the court doesn't always accept whatever politicians tell it to.
Is it? But surely politicians make the law,
Absolutely.
And judges merely interpret the law. So they have to do what politicians have told them, or they ought to that extent.
Absolutely, but sometimes politicians make a law, for example, a human rights law, and then the courts interpret it in a way that future politicians do not like, as is the case that happened now, right? So I am frustrated as well by the amount of time it's taken. I think that both the EU and the Strasbourg Court, which is a separate institution, obviously, I think both of them have not had a very good survival instinct in how rigid they have been in such cases. But I really am hopeful, because I have seen the same thing happening throughout Europe, and I think that it is in the interest of all parties and in the interest of democracy, really, that this happens.
All right. Well, Michael, I'd like to bring you in on this, because there's nothing Shabana Mahmood has said recently that I have disagreed with. Probably not a lot Nigel Farage would have disagreed with. But it seems to me she's promising things that she can't deliver because she's dependent on a third party to do it. And the third party show no sign as yet of being willing to do these sorts of things.
Well, I think we are seeing the other signatories to the European Convention on Human Rights moving pretty rapidly at the moment, actually. And I think Stella's right to be optimistic on this.
But not France or Germany?
No, but I think they will probably come round in due course. These things, you know how the world works, you know how politics work. People don't suddenly change their minds all in one go overnight. But I think it's also interesting what Stella says about how actually the figures for Article 3 and Article 8 cases, they're not very many in this country. The press makes a big fuss about them. Divisive politicians make a big fuss about them. And it would be interesting to know whether the figures are equally low in the rest of Europe. I suspect they are. That's not a reason why these changes should not be made. But I think if you think that just by changing the law on this, that somehow the number of deportations is rapidly going to arise, I think both of you are going to be very disappointed.
Andrew, the argument they put, very reasonable, very calmly put. It doesn't give two hoots for parliamentary democracy, does it, and how a country is meant to be governed. And it's deeply unresponsive to the voters who put you there.
So, Jacob, exactly the point I was going to make. So if you come to my constituency, either of you, you will not find hardly anybody that would share your view. The British people want protection. protection from violent criminals, protection from gang rapists, protection from sexual offenders, and all the things we've been discussing. The ECHR may have had good intentions to begin with, but no longer does it work in Britain's interests. And frankly, we are a democracy and we must be sovereign in our own land. So my constituents elect me as their Member of Parliament. We must make the laws and the laws must be implemented. You cannot have international judges dictating to countries like the United Kingdom with a proud record of human rights, an historic record of human rights and liberties. That is why we need to leave the ECHR.
We're going to have to move on. I'm so sorry to cut you off. Because we've got something very important from Patrick Christys, who's joining me now to preview an extraordinary and harrowing story that he will be reporting on later tonight. Patrick.
Jacob, look, thank you very much for squeezing me into your busy schedule. So we appear to be reporting every single day or reading about every single day some kind of attack by an asylum seeker or an illegal immigrant. But of course, what you never hear from are the victims and the survivors of those attacks. That is until now. In about half an hour's time, we're going to be hearing from brave Abby, a teenage girl who has courageously waived her right to anonymity so that she can have her say and tell the world about what happened to her and how at risk people are now as a result of Britain's broken asylum system. We can hear a little bit now from Abby about the moment of the attack, the moment that changed her life.
And I hear the leaves rustling and I turn around thinking it's my friend, but I couldn't see anything. And all I heard was a Middle Eastern accent ask me if I'm okay. And that's when I knew that it was in fact not my friend, and I knew that something was wrong. I did not want that whatsoever. And I'm like, no, I just need to get back to my friends. No, I just need to get back to my friends. That was all that I could say. It makes you feel so vulnerable. And, you know, this is my own body, and my control of my own body was taken away from me.
Abby and her family reached out to us. Again, you're going to hear this later on about why they were so keen to waive her right to anonymity and why she wants her story to be out there. The message as well comes from her mother. We interview her mother, which is another thing that we're going to be hearing from this evening about exactly her message to Sir Keir Starmer, which is basically that if it was his children who were being put at risk, then he would do something about the asylum system. We are supporting Abby and her family throughout all of this process as well. Back to you, Jacob, but please do tune in from 9 p.m. until 11 p.m. tonight.
Well, Patrick, I think that's going to be essential viewing for GB News viewers. It's going to be a harrowing time, but I would strongly encourage people to watch it, obviously only here on GB News from 9 o'clock. Well, in a moment, we're going to be moving on to something else.
In a little while, you'll be seeing I'm suing the BBC for putting words in my mouth. Literally, they put words in my mouth.
They put words in his mouth. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, has launched a £7.4 billion defamation lawsuit against the BBC, accusing the broadcaster of misleading editing in a Panorama documentary about the 6th of January. Meanwhile, talks on a £31 billion UK-US tech deal have reportedly stalled over trade disputes. Is the special relationship in special measures?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're thinking of heading overseas for a holiday, well, you'll find plenty of fine weather in Greece and Cyprus. Italy too, but fairly showery with a keen northerly breeze for the Canary Islands and some heavy rain across eastern Spain. That's going to stick around for a couple of days. Meanwhile, ahead of another area of low pressure, Italy and Greece are largely fine, but there is another low on the way, arriving into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, very good evening to you. I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, after what has been a largely fine day for many of us, things are set to change through the next 24 hours, with some wet weather going to arrive in time for tomorrow. That's all due to a weather system that's currently out towards the west of us. But before this, we have a ridge of high pressure, and so relatively quiet weather across us through large chunks of the night. As a result, we're going to have a lot of dry weather, yes, but also quite a lot of clear skies. And with that, we're going to see some mist and fog patches developing, particularly across central and eastern parts. They could be quite dense. Also worth noting that temperatures are going to drop a little bit lower than some recent nights, so a chillier start to the day tomorrow. Could even be a touch of frost around. So first thing tomorrow, a chilly start, yes. Largely dry across central and southern parts of England and also across the east, but watch out for those fog patches. A different story towards the north and west, however. That front that I mentioned at the start, that will have spread its way in, and so we're going to see some fairly persistent and at times heavy rain across many places, and with all that wet weather, the winds will be strengthening as well. So a blustery, wet start to the day for most. Clinging on to the dry weather across the far east of England through much of the day. Elsewhere, it's going to be pretty wet at times. The highest rainfall totals likely to build up over parts of South Wales and southwest England. Dartmoor, for example, could see 40 to 60 millimetres, enough to cause some disruption. Temperatures on paper are a few degrees above average for the time of year, but with the unsettled weather, well, it's not going to feel particularly pleasant. Then as we go into Thursday, there's more rain set to push its way in, a swathe of even heavier rain coming in from the south-southwest. So watch out for that, as it could cause some more disruption with the ground already so saturated. Friday for many actually looks like a largely fine end to the week, but a more changeable pattern into the weekend. Bye-bye.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
United States President Donald Trump has launched a £7.4 billion defamation lawsuit against the BBC, accusing the broadcaster of misleading editing in a panorama documentary about the 6th of January, which spliced together two clips, making it look as though he encouraged the storming of the Capitol.
To cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
The BBC says it will defend the case, with a spokesman saying the BBC sincerely regrets the manner in which the video clip was edited, but added, "We strongly disagree there is a basis for a defamation claim." Meanwhile, talks on a £31 billion UK-US tech deal have reportedly stalled over disputed trade terms. Is President Trump right to take the BBC to court? And is the government too focused on appeasing the European Union at the peril of a lucrative trade deal with the United States? Well, my pugnacious panel is still here. The MP for Romford, Andrew Rosendale, and the journalist and broadcaster Michael Crick. Andrew, you're not the BBC's greatest fan, but do you really want it to have to stump up £7.4 billion of licence fees money to Donald J. Trump?
Look, the BBC have been disgraceful in what they've done. And it seems to me that for too long the BBC has been infiltrated by people of left-wing opinion. It's not representative of the British people. The BBC should be proudly promoting Britain and British values and be an impartial source of news. Now, they've proved over this splicing of Donald Trump that they're not, that they're being controlled seemingly of people of a political viewpoint, which is frankly inappropriate for what should be, a world-class news broadcaster, which is what we always thought it was. So, of course, I don't want the BBC to have to stump up that kind of cash, because it's my constituents that are going to foot the bill for this. The licence fee, frankly, it's out of date, and we have to relook at the whole of the BBC, how it operates. I want it to broadcast state occasions, Trooping the Colour, State Opening of Parliament. I want it to be world-class in news. I want it to do local things as well in our communities. But I don't want it to be a left-wing voice, because it's not really representative of what the British people are.
And do you think it should settle with Trump? Or should it fight the action?
That's a matter for the BBC to decide. I think it's a sad point in history for the BBC.
I'm going to ask Michael the same thing. That even if the BBC could win, American courts are so expensive. Is it tactically better for its reputation, for its relationship with the White House, simply to say, look, we've made a big mistake, which they accept. Here's a few £1 million. Let's close this down now. What would you be advising them if you were a BBC executive?
I would be saying the way to deal with bullies is to stand up to bullies and not give in to them. And I would go further than fight this case. I would launch a counter case against Donald Trump for $11 billion, suing him for defaming the whole body of BBC journalists, for saying that BBC journalists, and he meant BBC journalists as a whole, he used the word are corrupt. This from a man who I think is probably the most corrupt president in American history. We could argue about that. Stand up to him. Now, on this particular case, it's quite clear that hardly anybody in America saw it.
But I don't think the BBC
it was wrong.
can sue a sitting American president. So I think that's a slight flaw in your argument.
They should take a look at it. Why not? Next time he comes here, issue the writ, and admittedly, they've only got a year to do it, because he said it the other day. Seriously, stand up to him. Don't worry about Sarah Smith not being able to stand in the White House garden. It doesn't really matter. A lot of American correspondents reporting for here never go to the White House. They don't get time. But more seriously, you have to stand up to Trump. It is appalling that Trump, with big American broadcast outlets, have coughed up billions because of his threats.
Millions.
All right, millions. But nonetheless, what is going on there is a form of extortion and a form of pushing them around because he has the power over their futures.
But you can only do that because the BBC made a major blunder, and the Panorama thing was pretty disgraceful.
It was a serious error, and we still don't know how it happened, remarkably. I wish we did. It was a serious error, and I share some of Andrew's concerns about left-wing bias in the BBC and other broadcasters, and I'm on the record as saying that. But I think in this case,
you're not worried about left-wing bias in GBNews. People's Channel.
That's the problem. There is about 1,000 times, in the opposite direction. And if you want me to go on about that, Ofcom are not doing their job properly, and all of that. My views are well known on this. Stand up to Trump on behalf of the rest of the world. Trump is pushing the world around in all sorts of ways. Stand up to bullies.
GBNews, fortunately, has reporters in the White House able to talk to him, because we're on the side of the British people.
But I'm not asking very tough questions, though.
Well, I haven't been invited. But Andrew, I also want to go on to this trade issue, that it's really important that people talk about the European Union, but our biggest single national trading partner is the US, and has been for a very long time. How much should we give in to Trump? Or is Michael onto something, that Trump is just a bit of a bully and we should be quite tough about these trade talks?
So I think that the problem is we have a Labour government at the moment that's very keen to claim that they've negotiated these fantastic trade deals. We all know that trade deals are not as simple as they may sound. And Starmer wanted to be able to say, look at me, I've got a trade deal with India, I've got a trade deal with the United States, etc., etc. But the details have not been looked at in quite the way they should have been. So this is about politics, this is about the Labour government trying to say we've achieved what the previous government failed to achieve. And frankly, Jacob, I do think that in Trump's first term, when Mrs May was Prime Minister, I think we could have done a lot better then. We could have had a really good trade deal, had the Conservatives, had the backbone to seize the opportunity of Brexit and have a really good trade deal during that period. We flunked it. And so what's happened now is that Trump is emboldened and he's got a weak Labour Prime Minister in Starmer, who doesn't know what he's doing, and so he's walked into a trap, and that is why this trade deal is going pear-shaped.
Michael, I'll give you a final word on trade.
Well, I would say the same thing. Be tough. Bullies respected if you're tough back. If they see you're weak, they'll go for you.
All right, I'm glad to say that Michael Creek is a great expert on bullies. I wonder why. Anyway, a BBC spokesman said, as we have previously made clear, we will be defending this case. We are not going to make further comment on ongoing, growing, dreadful word shouldn't be used, continuing legal proceedings. The word ongoing is on my banned list. In a moment, the British state and its institutions have been the envy of the world and commanded the loyalty of its people for centuries. But today, is the state functioning as it should? A new paper from the Centre for a Better Britain explores this issue and why it matters. I will be speaking to the organisation's top man shortly.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk
No,
now?
that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
We're governed by consent, and for centuries the legitimacy of the British state has relied upon that through democracy, the rule of law, tradition, and a tacit belief that the system works. A new paper from the Centre for a Better Britain argues those pillars are now crumbling with signs of an emerging crisis of legitimacy within our institutions. So what's driving this loss of trust? Has the rule of law become the rule of lawyers? And can the British state adapt to a changing electorate before consent starts to fracture? Well, I'm joined now by the Chief Executive of the Centre for a Better Britain, Jonathan Brown. Jonathan, thank you very much for coming in. And I ought to let my viewers know this particularly brilliant document has a foreword written by their very own presenter. So I will try not to be too biased in the questions I asked you. Tell me what you're trying to get across, because you say that representative democracy, customary and traditional law, the rule of law and competence are all under attack. What do you mean by that? How is competence under attack or threat?
Well, thanks for having me on, Jacob, and quite right, an absolutely brilliant forward, which I think absolutely makes the paper here. I think the fundamental issue I'm trying to get at is, and my brilliant team is trying to get at as well, is does your vote matter? So I think we were all brought up at school thinking, well, we're a parliamentary democracy, you go in, you vote, you elect ministers, and they exert your will in some form. We all know it doesn't work perfectly, but the question is, does it make any difference at all? And what we were addressing is fundamentally, is the British state so circumscribed now by everything from the legal apparatus, the civil service, the rotation of ministers, that functionally we're not actually a democracy anymore?
And you're worried about democracy itself in the way that we vote. I know you have a section on religious voting and that some communities are voting for religiously orientated MPs. But that happened up until the 1970s with Glasgow and Liverpool voting according to whether people were Catholic or Protestant. So these things have happened in the past.
They have. I always think, having studied history at university, they certainly have happened in the past. Were they desirable in the past either? Absolutely not. It's a bit like, well, the Dark Ages were also a grim period and happened in the past. Just because something has precedent.
But our democracy survived in spite of...
It survived, but there was a lot of sectarian violence. You used the examples of Liverpool and Glasgow. I think people of our generation vividly remember what happened in Northern Ireland through the 60s right into the 90s.
And the rule of law, I think if we had Lord Hermer on, he would say that he is absolutely committed to the rule of law. Is it just you mean something different by the rule of law from what Lord Hermer would mean?
I'd be amazed if we did have a Lord Hermer on. Which would be I'd
be astonished if he joined.
Yes, that would be my first.
He'd be very welcome.
I think what we're seeing now is the judiciary has taken such a large role in our constitution that the elected will of the people is no longer able to actually work its way through. I think our original assumption that laws were made by Parliament. That Parliament was elected by the British people, and then the judiciary judged on those laws. Now you have a whole range of laws, including international law, the very thing Lord Hermer has put in, which prevents that will actually taking place.
He has put that in, but we have a dualist system, as you know, and international law is only effective in UK law if Parliament has said so. So the Human Rights Act is a decision by the UK Parliament to say that that law will be effectively a senior law, a constitutional statute, the term the courts invented. So it's our choice, and surely another parliament could unmake that choice.
They could technically, but as we know, there's only a limited legislative agenda. Not every parliament can undo every single aspect. And what we've seen, and the Human Rights Act being such an absolutely classic case, is it's so baked into every aspect of what we do that a single parliament can't come in and say, oh, we'll get rid of that. Yes, it is technically possible, and that is the fig leaf by which international law can interfere constantly.
So you sound quite gloomy about it, that we can't put these things right. Are you as gloomy as you're sounding?
I'm... Gloomy is the wrong place. What's the Churchill comment? I'm an optimist. What's the point of doing anything else? I think one of the points of the paper is to socialise the idea and get people to understand that this is something we can address. We don't have to accept a democracy that's not really a democracy, that's technically a technocracy. We saw with Brexit that at least some steps can be taken to do that. Change can happen, but the British people have to want change, and the parliamentary system has to want change.
And do you think first past the post is the right way to get change, or would you change our voting system?
Honestly, I don't think the issue is around first past the post. I think the issue is around what happens once minister is in. I mean, you have experience of this yourself, Jacob. The issue is once someone is elected, be that through PR or first past the post, they then can't do anything. And that has become more of a fundamental problem than what our particular voting system is.
And we've hardly got on to the question of competence, but thank you very much for coming in. I would strongly recommend this paper. I'm sure it can be bought at all good bookstores and no doubt found online. That is all from me. Up next, it's the one and only Patrick Christys. Patrick, we already know what's on your programme, but do tell us about your very important report.
Absolutely. Look, Britain is in the midst of an illegal migrant and an asylum seeker sex attack epidemic. What you never hear from, of course, really, is the victims and survivors. Well, that changes tonight. Abby, 19 years old, has bravely waived her right to anonymity, along with her mother, to come forward and outline exactly what happened to her and issue a warning to this government and also a plea to try to make things better for others. All of that in just a few minutes' time.
Warm and cosy, with a chance of zero visibility. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, after what has been a largely fine day for many of us, things are set to change through the next 24 hours, with some wet weather going to arrive in time for tomorrow. That's all due to a weather system that's currently out towards the west of us. But before this, we have a ridge of high pressure, and so relatively quiet weather across us through large chunks of the night. As a result, we're going to have a lot of dry weather, yes, but also quite a lot of clear skies, and with that we're going to see some mist and fog patches developing, particularly across central and eastern parts. They could be quite dense. Also worth noting that temperatures are going to drop a little bit lower than some recent nights, so a chillier start to the day tomorrow. Could even be a touch of frost around. So first thing tomorrow, a chilly start, yes, largely dry across central and southern parts of England and also across the east, but watch out for those fog patches. A different story towards the north and west, however. That front that I mentioned at the start, that will have spread its way in, and so we're going to see some fairly persistent and at times heavy rain across many places, and with all that wet weather, the winds will be strengthening as well. So a blustery, wet start to the day for most. Clinging on to the dry weather across the far east of England through much of the day. Elsewhere, it's going to be pretty wet at times. The highest rainfall totals likely to build up over parts of South Wales and southwest England. Dartmoor, for example, could see 40 to 60 millimetres, enough to cause some disruption. Temperatures on paper are a few degrees above average for the time of year, but with the unsettled weather, well, it's not going to feel particularly pleasant. Then as we go into Thursday, there's more rain set to push its way in, a swathe of even heavier rain coming in from the south-southwest. So watch out for that, as it could cause some more disruption with the ground already so saturated. Friday for many actually looks like a largely fine end to the week, but a more changeable pattern into the weekend. Bye-bye.
Warm and cosy, with a chance of zero visibility. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's the big one. Your chance to win a whopping £85,000 in tax-free cash. The largest cash prize we've given away to date. That's like over £7,000 a month extra in your bank account each month for 12 whole months. That's a year of yes. Yes to holidays, yes to treats, yes to shopping trips, yes to home improvements. For another chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB18 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 30th of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all